In this video, we'll discuss about allosteric enzyme. What is allosteric enzyme? Allosteric is derived from Greek. Allo means other. Stereos means site or space. So, they are enzyme which have an extra site. So, it have an extra site here, extra site in addition to the active site. So here active site is presented, along with it have addition site also, extra site. So that extra site is called as allosteric site. So like this extra site presented means that name is called allosteric site. So this enzyme and enzyme which containing these site are called as allosteric site. So this one is the enzyme, this one is the simple non-regulatory enzyme. Here don't have extra site, but here it have extra site, it have that name allosteric site. So that enzyme name is called as allosteric enzyme. This one is the normal enzyme, it having active site. These are both are active site, this one is the allosteric site. So in this diagram you can see allosteric site and simple non-regulatory enzyme. Both have active site for binding of substrate, but in case of allosteric enzyme, in addition to that active site, it has an extra site. That extra site on the allosteric enzyme is called as allosteric site. We know that a simple non-regulatory enzyme substrate bind at that active site of that enzyme and form enzyme substrate complex. So here enzyme, here active site, here substrate will bind, it will form enzyme substrate ES complex. So this EX, that enzyme substrate complex give rise to the product. What binds at that allosteric site of that enzyme and what is the significance of these molecules? Small molecules called as, this one is the small molecules. This one name is called modulator or modifier or effectors. It is bind to that allosteric site. These small molecules bind to that allosteric site and this modulators bind with the allosteric site by reversible non-covalent interaction. How it will bind? By binding with reversible non-covalent interaction. When a modulator bind, this activity of enzyme increases or decreased. When it will bind with this active site, that enzyme activity, it may be increased or decreased. Based on the effect of that modulator, these are classified into two types. So positive modulator or stimulatory modulator, it increase that enzyme activity, where that negative modulator this one decreases that activity of enzyme. So here two possibility, whether it will increases or decreases that enzyme activity. So based on the effect of modulator, these are classified into two types: positive modulator or stimulatory modulator. It increases that enzyme activity, whereas negative modulator or inhibitory modulator, it decreases that activity of enzyme. Another important point, like active site is specific for substrate and allosteric site is specific for modulator. The overall effect of modulator bind with allosteric site, it is alter that conformation of that enzyme. Now coming to detailed about each modulator. First one is positive modulator. So what happened, that enzyme activity in the presence of positive modulator, the positive modulator bring that conformation changes. So it will give conformation changes to that active site of that enzyme. Here it will give conformation change to that active site of that enzyme, such that it leads to binding of substrate to that active site, so thereby it form enzyme substrate complex which gives that product. On coming to that enzyme activity in the presence of negative modulator, when that negative modulator bind with allosteric site, it will not allow the binding of the substrate to that active site of that enzyme. Because of negative modulator will change that conformation. So here it will change that conformation, here it will give that conformation, here it will change that conformation. So here enzyme substrate complex is not formed, that reason no product. So in case of positive modulator, that active site is allowed to bind with the substrate, so thereby it form the product. But whereas in case of negative modulator, that active site conformation is changed in such a way that substrate cannot bind with the active site, so thereby no product are formed. Based on the modulator bond with allosteric site, the allosteric enzyme are classified into homotrophic and heterotrophic. If the modulator bounded to that allosteric site of that substrate is called as homotrophic enzyme. If the modulator is other than the substrate, then it is called as heterotrophic enzyme. So the modulator bounded to allosteric site is the substrate, that name is called as homotrophic. Heterotrophic means modulator other than substrate, other molecules. Coming to examples of allosteric enzyme, it's phosphofructokinase, the most important regulatory enzyme of glycolysis. So here phosphofructokinase, so it has allosteric site and active site, it having allosteric site and active site. Coming to other important feature of allosteric enzyme containing many subunit. For example, pyruvate kinase, it having 4 subunit. Another important feature of allosteric enzyme, this one cannot obey Michaelis Menten kinetics, not obey Michaelis Menten kinetics. That means the velocity plotted against the substrate concentration, which gives sigmoid curve. But when you observed that non-allosteric enzyme, there when velocity is plotted against the substrate concentration, we have hyperbolic curve. So this is all about allosteric enzyme. So this video discussed allosteric enzyme. What is active site? What is enzyme substrate complex? So positive modulatory, second one is negative modulatory effect. Positive increases enzyme activity, negative one decreases enzyme activity. Then positive one producing product, negative modulator no product. Based on the nature of modulator, homotrophic and heterotrophic. Then example, phosphofructokinase, it having allosteric site as well as active site. Important features, it having 4 subunit. Example, pyruvate kinase. This one cannot obey this Michaelis Menten kinetics. It will producing sigmoid curve, normal one hyperbolic. Thanks for watching.